Welcome to Raising the Bar, Supply Chain Management Edition. I'm Steve Dandino, the Executive Director of the Reinvention Collaborative, and I'm excited to introduce this important segment in our professional development series designed to foreground online course design and pedagogical expertise in academic and professional disciplines, complementing Teaching Learning Center and global campus expertise. On behalf of the RC's 80 Research University members, I want to thank our distinguished colleagues from Iowa State University and University of Tennessee at Knoxville, two universities recognized as national leaders in supply chain management research and undergraduate and graduate education. I'm pleased at this time to turn the floor over to our moderator, Dr. Megan Gillette, Associate Teaching Professor in the Department of Human Development and Family Studies at Iowa State University. The floor is yours, Megan.
Great, thank you. Well, I think I can speak for all of the panelists and say that we thank you for your support for this, and we're glad that we got to be hooked up for this. So, and thank you to all the panelists for participating today. So I can start out by saying that at least Dave Cantor and I were asked to do this by our Center for Excellence in Learning and Teaching here at Iowa State, because earlier this year, Dave and I gave a presentation to our online learning community at Iowa State about how we do teamwork in online asynchronous classes. And so our names were sort of connected up with Raising the Bar, that our thoughts might be useful. So then we were paired up with the supply chain management folks from University of Tennessee. And so we're all here and excited to learn from each other. So the purpose for today's session is we want to have a discussion about strategies that faculty could consider when it comes to teaching supply chain management online. And also, you know, Dave and I use team-based learning, and our short presentation will be based off of that experience. But, you know, the goal isn't to get people to use team-based learning. The goal is to basically say, here's what we do, and if you are, you know, do group work and you're face-to-face and you're concerned about moving it online, or if you would like to start doing group work online, here's some tips that you might take just from our experience. So I think we could go ahead and introduce the panelists then and have them introduce themselves. And what I'm going to do, just so that it's not awkward, is I'm going to call on each one of you and then there's no starts and stops, and then you can all introduce yourselves, just who you are and where you're at. So I'm going to start with Mark Collins.
Hi, I'm Mark Collins. I'm a distinguished lecturer and director of the Technology Enhanced Education Department at Haslam College of Business at UT Knoxville.
Great, and Dave.
My name is Dave Cantor. I'm a professor of supply chain management at the Ivy College of Business at Iowa State. I've been at the university for 11 years now, and excited about this because I think we all can learn a little something about teaching online as we move into this new world, so to speak.
And Emily.
Good morning, I'm Emily Conkey. I'm a lecturer of supply chain management at Iowa State University. I've been teaching in the supply chain discipline for the past 10 years or so.
And Shay.
Hello, Shay Scott. I serve on the faculty at Department of Supply Chain Management in the Haslam College of Business, University of Tennessee. Also serve as Executive Director of our Global Supply Chain Institute here at the university.
And Amber.
Amber Belleville. I'm at Iowa State University in the Supply Chain Department. I'm an assistant teaching professor.
And Peter.
Great. Hi, I'm Peter Ralston. I'm an assistant professor of supply chain management within the Ivy College of Business at Iowa State University.
And Chad. Oh, you're muted, Chad.
Got to unmute. You got to learn how to use this. Hi, I'm Chad Autry, Department of Supply Chain Management's department head at the University of Tennessee in the Haslam College of Business. And like my colleagues at Iowa State, we have been experimenting in online for a little while, and I'm really looking forward to hearing what everybody's been doing to make this an effective way of communicating what we know.
Wonderful. So I think next we just wanted to have someone from each university just sort of reflect on their own department's experiences with online education so far. And I think you're up, Chad, for that.
Happy to talk a little bit about that. So at University of Tennessee, we have been doing supply chain education through an online media for at least 3 or 4 years now. And it really began with a moment in time where we realized that we needed to try to come up with a way to be a little bit more efficient and effective in delivering our large introductory undergraduate course to many, many students in a single semester. And so if you've never been to our facility, we have that course held at one point in time, I guess, in a giant auditorium. And it was one of those moments where we said, maybe there's a way we can do this a little bit more effectively. And so a semester came, and Shay Scott's here in the room with us, where we got past 750 students taking our undergraduate course that's in the core, that's the basics of supply chain. And Shay was one of the teachers of that. And we just, we sat down and talked one day with he and a couple of our other colleagues and said, this is just not the right way to be delivering good content. I mean, there's nothing really different about being on a stage, 75 feet or 100 feet away from a student than there is, doing it in any other way, and maybe in a virtual space. And so we started looking around for solutions, and one of our other colleagues, Dr. Ted Stank, stood up and said, well, I'll do that. I'll try to put this course online, thinking that, of course, well, that's going to be easy. I'll just try to stand up and do exactly what I do in the big auditorium. And I'll try to do that, instead of doing it in an auditorium, I'll do it at my house, and I'll record that, and everybody can watch it, and they'll think I'm amazing. And lo and behold, it just didn't work out that way. So that was our first foray there, and then subsequently, and I guess sort of simultaneously and a little bit subsequently, Mark Collins, who's here with us, began to for the colleges, other majors began to introduce some summer online courses that people could take in the undergraduate core, and so we all began to compare notes and realize we had a lot to learn about online education, and our teaching and learning center began to give us hints and tips and then send us to conferences and et cetera to try to figure out how to do that. And so in the last couple of years, Shay and I and some of our colleagues have begun to develop an online Masters of Science program, and taking the learnings we had from Mark's undergraduate program and from the original supply chain course, we began to build a semi-synchronous, semi-asynchronous program for people with a low level of post-graduate experience, so that they could begin to think about the supply chain in a more sophisticated way, and we could do a deeper dive on many of our subjects. And so that Masters of Supply Chain online program is just being now kind of launched. We're in our third cohort coming through, and we've learned quite a few lessons. And so I think we'll hear about some of those as Shay and Mark begin to interact with us today. But all in all, I think we've come a long way, and in a 3 to 5 year period, we now know a lot more about what it takes to be effective at actually creating learning outcomes online versus simply talking to the screen. And so today is going to be a day where I'm really looking forward to comparing notes with our colleagues from Iowa State, because I know that they have also kind of enacted a similar journey. And so looking forward to really hearing what they've developed as well, and maybe doing some things to improve our own programs as a result. So Megan, that's kind of our short history, but happy to take more questions or have more dialogue as the day goes by.
Lovely, thank you. And then Dave, what's been happening at Iowa State?
Thank you, Megan. Thank you, everyone, for participating this morning. We've been following the same similar journey that Tennessee has. We started offering or teaching online in our Supply Chain 301 class, where Amber is our course coordinator. We've taught that course in a hybrid format, where some of the content is taught online as well as in person. And then Amber has been leading our effort with taking a section of that course and moving it fully online, and has some experiences that she can share with the group today because she just finished teaching one of those sections that was taught fully online this summer. And we're proud to say that I think we had almost a record enrollment in our Introduction to Supply Chain Management course this summer for students who are at home or not on campus and wanting to get started in terms of their supply chain curriculum through our foundation course. We've also been pursuing other efforts. We started a graduate certificate in supply chain management a couple of years ago, where it's a 4-course sequence that students can take online. All the courses are taught fully online, including the one that I teach in procurement. And I've been working with our Center for Excellence in Learning and Teaching and Megan and her colleagues with learning about what are some best practices, if you will, in terms of teaching online using the team-based learning approach, and sharing those experiences throughout our campus community as we tried to migrate very quickly starting last semester because of the pandemic. So we followed the same journey using various technologies and various resources within our department. We partnered with CELT, we partnered with the College of Engineering, which also has an instructional design team, and also hiring some external consultants on an as-needed basis to help us with moving our courses online. So we don't have one perfect solution in terms of how we assist our faculty with moving content online. We're learning as we go and sharing our experiences because every faculty member has been using their own approach, their own style with moving in-person content to the online format. So we're delighted to also learn from the University of Tennessee in terms of what has worked for them and to continue having this dialogue even past today's webinar. So Megan, I'll turn it back to you.
Great. And as Dave mentioned, we have at Iowa State, we have our Center for Excellence in Learning and Teaching. We call it CELT. And I forgot to tell Steve that I'm also a CELT faculty affiliate, in addition to my teaching professor job. And you know, I just want to give a plug for the Centers for Excellence in Learning and Teaching, or whatever they are at your university. At Iowa State, for example, they've been providing a lot of support to faculty. I mean, they always do, but especially this summer, they've really ramped up their offerings. And then one thing that Iowa State did is they provided an optional course shell in Canvas, which is our LMS, to use so that if, you know, it can at least reduce your cognitive load in terms of putting your course online, so that it already provides like an outline, a shell for how you can, and all you have to do is plug it in. And so I want to say to the people who are watching this, if your institution does not have a Center for Excellence in Learning and Teaching or something like that, you know, a lot of these resources are actually publicly on their website. So ISU's CELT has a robust set of resources on its website. You could just Google ISU CELT, and I'm sure you could do that with any other university that has one. So if you don't have access to a Center for Excellence in Learning and Teaching, then I would suggest maybe checking out other universities, and you know, they just put a lot of resources online. So next, Dave and I want to just share with you what we've learned so far, and sort of an abbreviated version of the presentation we gave earlier this spring. And are you sharing your screen, Dave, or do you want me to do that? You can do that.
Yeah, I've got it all ready to go. Okay. So as Megan had stated, this is a shortened version of the presentation that we gave to our campus community last spring or summer about how we have approached online teaching. And what we want to do is just share with you some key points, if you will, in terms of how we went about teaching online. Let me just.
So you go ahead, Dave, and I'll just follow along with you with the bullets.
Sure. So let's go ahead and go to the next slide. What we're going to basically do is just give you a very short overview of team-based learning and how we've used it, and how this is an approach that can be used for both online, small as well as large courses. I teach a small course, roughly of 15 to 20 students, and I think Megan teaches a larger section of students, and we have found that this approach can be modified and adapted for both types of size courses.
Yeah, so you have a smaller group of graduate students, and I have a larger group of undergraduate students.
Exactly. So what we've done is try to use the TBL format as a way to meet the needs of both student populations. So with team-based learning, the idea is to structure the course so that you have both individual as well as team-based activities. And what we're trying to do is to create an environment where the students are able to support each other as they work through the course content. And we kind of scaffold the experience using these team-based learning principles. One of the principles is to ensure that students have read the instructional materials, watched the videos before at the beginning of a given module. And so preparation is so key. And with the team-based learning approach, we build in different types of accountability mechanisms to ensure that students are keeping up with the assignments. And one of those key dimensions is something called an IRAT, or Individual Rapid Assessment Test. It's like a short quiz that takes students roughly 20 minutes to complete on their own. And after they do that, they work as a team to complete those same questions using what is known as a TRAT, or team-based rapid assessment, where a team leader will facilitate discussion on each of the multiple choice quiz questions that the students took on an individual basis. And it's the team leader who facilitates the discussion, in this case in an online format using maybe Canvas's discussion board feature, and tries to build consensus as to what the team believes is the correct answer to each one of those quiz questions. The team leader submits those responses on behalf of the team. And then if the team believes that there were any ambiguous questions, then the team leader will file an appeal with the course instructor to ensure that any ambiguous questions were addressed and the team was awarded some points if the instructor does agree that there was a problem with the question. Now, just focusing on the big picture here, the next stage is the application exercise, which is this next part of our diagram, where the team leverages the lessons that they learned in terms of the course materials that they read for that week, the lessons learned from completing the IRAT and TRAT, and applies those lessons learned to the application exercise. In my case, I assign Harvard case study materials to my students so that they can work as a team and work through the problem that's presented in the Harvard case study. So that's basically the big picture overview of what team-based learning is. It requires that students prepare at the beginning of every week. They work on the IRATs and TRATs, and then apply what they've learned to the application exercise, in this case, a Harvard case study assignment, and every team reports back to the class in terms of what they learned. So let's go to the next slide. So team dynamics is so key. It's important that the teams are able to work together and to function as a coherent group. And so Megan and I have incorporated team building activities into our course, including at the beginning of the semester, where they do self-introductions, they do exercises where they kind of work on icebreakers, they complete a team contract at the beginning of the semester so that they set expectations in terms of roles and responsibilities, when they are going to meet, how they're going to deal with any potential team cohesion issues. At the middle part of the semester, I have my students work on a team feedback assignment where they are asked to provide anonymous feedback in terms of how their team is performing. This is a non-graded assignment so that they feel more comfortable sharing candid feedback. And then I do the same thing at the end of the semester where the students are graded on the feedback that they're provided to their team members. But that allows me to assess how well the team was functioning. And so I do this twice a semester. And I let them know about this assignment at the beginning of the semester so that they feel like there's a way that they can share feedback and concerns so that those concerns can be addressed before the end of the semester. Megan, do you do something similar?
Yeah, so I do these, we call them peer evaluations. I do them 3 times a semester, both face-to-face and online. For me, they're all graded. You know, one of the this is one of the main components of TBL, at least, is that they get to evaluate each other so that if there are people who are not pulling their weight, then they don't end up with the same grade at the end of the semester. And, I would say, if you're going to do a peer evaluation, you're going to have to set some rules. Like if you don't complete it, then you get a 0. If you don't complete it in a professional manner, you have the chance to redo it, but your grade, your own peer eval grade will be reduced by 50%. And then I also guide them, especially for undergrads at least. I provide some onboarding for that. So I explain why it's important, what the purpose of it is. I explain how to provide positive professional feedback, because they have to give both sort of a positive and a constructive feedback. So guidance on how to give constructive feedback in a professional manner. And then also I think is key is to provide them guidance for how to receive constructive feedback, and talking to them about how they might be feeling after they read some comments and things like that. And once I started doing that, the peer evaluations, I think, were much more effective at building team dynamics and supporting that. So I just wanted to throw that out there. And also for my online classes, the peer evals are worth about 24% of the grade. So if your peers really don't think that you're doing a good job, your grade really is going to be impacted. Face-to-face, mine are more like 18%, I think, of the grade. But
Excellent. So one of the, I'm sorry, go ahead.
You're okay. Yeah, Dave mentioned the weekly leaders earlier, and I think I actually can't imagine an online team-based learning or group work class without a team leader. So I think this would be relevant for anybody who would be working, having students work in groups. But like you mentioned before, their job is really to sort of facilitate team assignment discussions. They are going to submit on behalf of the team. And as the instructor, I think we both do this, where at the beginning of the semester, I just say, here's your team leader calendar. I post it into their team's discussion area in Canvas. And I say, if you want to change, like if one week doesn't work for you, just work it out with each other. You don't need to tell me, because quite frankly, I don't care who submits it. And in Canvas, I can't tell who submitted it. So it really doesn't matter to me, but I at least give them that schedule. And I think, Dave, you have them, the team leader, I think, does a little bit more work for you, because they actually like set up sort of the team discussion in the Google Doc or whatever it is. I already have my questions set up like in a discussion thread. So, but you can, point being, you can have the leader do some different things. But they also need to, at the beginning of the week, they need to communicate with their team members to say, okay, the TRAT is due Wednesday night, and I'm going to submit it by 9 p.m. So please have your answers in by 8 p.m. Okay, the application exercise is due on Friday night. So make sure you have, all these things so that they're really communicating, and they're not allowed to submit an assignment before the day it's due, right? Some weekly leaders may say, well, we have from Thursday to Sunday to work on this. And so I'm, but I don't want to do any work over the weekend, so I'm just going to submit it on Friday. Well, that's against the rules, and they actually can't submit answers in Canvas. Like the answer portal won't open up until Sunday, for example. And people often say, well, but what if and students say, well, what if a leader forgets their responsibility for that week? Well, often always the other teammates will be on them and saying, they'll be texting them, or they'll be posting in the team discussion forum, hey, when do you need things due this week? It's totally fine. There are some times where the team leader has been on the ball. They've been helping facilitate. They've been saying, hey, Dave, you haven't answered this question yet. What do you think about this? Or, hey, everyone, let's really come to a consensus about what our one answer to this question is. Dave says this, Shay says that. What do we, let's get that answer sort of solidified. And, but then it might come right down to it, and they either forget at 9 o'clock on Wednesday night to submit it, or something has happened. fall ill, or their roommate falls ill and they have to take them to the hospital, whatever, and they aren't able, and then you get this frantic email the next morning saying, oh my gosh, I'm so sorry, I totally forgot, you know, please just punish me, like don't punish the rest of my team, because I know that's literally what every single one of them has said over the years. So, and it's really very rare that a weekly leader forgets. It will happen, but it's not common. And so, you know, in that case, I just say, no problem. I'm just going to extend the deadline for, you know, just get it submitted by tonight. And it's no problem. I don't take off any points. Everyone breathes a sigh of relief and it's fine. Now, one thing that I do encourage is to put weekly leader performance as part of the peer evaluation of the team assessment. And so, you know, in mine, I have 3 questions that are specifically about different dimensions of weekly leader performance. And so that if they really aren't a good weekly leader, then again, their peer evaluation, which is worth, you know, 24%, is going to be lower, and they aren't going to end up with the same grade as everyone else at the end of the semester. Did you want to add to that, Dave?
Yeah, just a couple of points. One, so what we see here on the slide are screen captures from my Canvas site. So in my Canvas page, for every module, I have weekly materials at a glance. That's what the page is called. And I list out what are the learning objectives, 5 learning objectives, for example, for that week. And I number them. And so what we see in this one box in the middle here is MO number 1, 2, 3, and 4. So that's where how I'm assessing or the learning objectives for that week on that assignment. And the application exercise is intended to get at learning objective 1 and 2. So students are able to see how the module learning objectives relate to the different activities on a weekly basis. The other thing is we have a screen capture of team leaders this week. So I have established who the team leaders are going to be at the beginning of the semester. And in the module, I list out who those team leaders are for that given week. And then the other thing that you'll notice here is the due dates are posted within Canvas, within each module, in terms of when our assignments are due and who is responsible for submitting them. So in this case, the team leader submits the TRAT and the application exercise, so that's very clear that the team leader has the responsibility of submitting the team's assignments for particular activities as it's laid out in the module. So one of the things that we want to communicate is that you have to be very clear in terms of expectations, due dates, and be very consistent in terms of how your Canvas page is laid out and who is responsible for what. And I think that's very easy to do using the way the Canvas has been set up.
Yeah, and I'll add to that. In my course calendar, in my syllabus, you know, you have the assignment, the reading, the due date, and then I also have a column that says who submits this, or some, you know, it's submitted by, and then I literally say for each assessment, like you, weekly leader, you, weekly leader, so that, you know, it's just even more clear. The students haven't, it may be new that students will be working with a team and with a weekly leader, and it may be really overwhelming, but that at least makes it a little bit clear for them, I think.
Yeah. So we had mentioned the concept of accountability and how that's so important in a team-based learning environment, as well as just online in general, because it's easy for maybe someone to engage in some social loafing behavior, if you will. And so to make team-based learning work, or group work in general, one of the things that Megan and I do is we have IRATs that are established for every week. And remember, an IRAT is kind of like a short quiz. And the IRAT is just kind of to verify that the students have read the book chapter or the Harvard case study at the beginning of the week, so that they're prepared and ready to contribute to the team-based activities that are created for that given module. And in my case, I use short answer as well as multiple choice and true-false kind of questions. For the short answer, I've created a rubric that I tie to the IRAT, so that students will get some feedback as to whether or not they have completed the short answer based upon my expectations. So I use rubrics for both IRATs and TRATs, and I've configured that within Canvas so that it makes it easy for me as the instructor to provide feedback in terms of how the teams are doing in terms of the accountability portion of the course.
Yeah, and so in terms of logistics, like, you know, in Canvas, I have it timed, you know, so that they only have so many minutes to take their IRAT, right? So it's not open book. They really have to have read the chapter before they take it. They don't get to see the answers afterwards until the team assignment is done. So they don't get to see anything. They just submit it. So that just a few little logistical things for Canvas there. And then, so, you know, the idea is, okay, they take their IRAT to make sure that, you know, that personal accountability piece, to make sure that they've read. And then, you know, while they're taking that quiz, you know, they'll know, they'll sort of get a sense of like, gee, I really don't know very many of these answers. And so before I go and talk to my team and make a complete fool out of myself, perhaps I should go back and reread some of the things. And they actually do that. I mean, in my course evaluations, every semester it's like, what is one thing you liked, or, you know, whatever. And they're like, I actually read the textbook. Like, I actually did that. Whereas, you know, in other courses, maybe it's not as imperative for them to do that, but it's that social aspect, right? That they don't care if the instructor thinks what the instructor thinks of them, but they don't want to look like a fool in front of their teammates. So, so I think that's sort of the driver. But then they answer those same questions as a team. And so these are screenshots just of my, sorry, if it's not my kid, it's my cat, of my TRAT. And I use the discussion threads where each question gets its own discussion thread. And I would just say, make sure that they are really clearly labeled. In our Canvas, at least, if you do question 1 first, it'll go down to the bottom, right? So you can see mine are out of order, but that's okay. As long as they're clearly labeled, it's not a problem. You know, and you have your groups, your teams all in groups, and in Canvas are called groups. And so you can just post them in the main discussion, course-wide discussion thread, and then tell Canvas that you want it to populate to all of the groups. And then you'll see where the blue, that's what it looks like on my end, where you, you know, I'll have posted it and it'll be like, yep, here's where it all populated. And then you could click on team 1 and it would take you to their discussion. If you wanted. Did you want to add anything to that, Dave? Oh, there are bullets, sorry.
No, this is good. Maybe if we could maybe skip to the mini lectures. Can we do that?
Mm-hmm. Oh, yeah, I will add, general guidance that I give students is to answer about 1/3 of the questions and then come back the next day and then respond to other teammates' questions, because students are not used to starting an assignment and not finishing it, and it makes them very uncomfortable to only get in and answer 3 out of 10 questions. You know, we've never been programmed to do that, so you need to really give them permission to come in, only answer a few questions, and then come back the next day and answer the questions. So we can skip this, but basically the weekly leader submits on behalf of the team. Yeah, and I think we both use the text entry only in Canvas. So, okay, the mini lecture. So the idea is they've done their individual test quiz, they've done their team quiz. Now you need to follow up with them as the instructor and make sure to clear up any confusing points before they move on to the application exercise. And so what I do, Dave and I do it a little bit differently, but I can speak to what I do. I do a video where I sort of, you know, we'll look at their answers and see where they might have gotten tripped up, and I'll record a video that explains these things, or I'll add additional explanations for even questions that might have gotten right, some additional things that I might want them to know for their application exercise. And I embed the video in a mini quiz. So it unlocks, you know, when you want it to. And then they take a mini quiz over the mini lecture where they would have had to have watched the video in order to get just a few questions right. Like it might be things like, what TV show did I mention that explained the concept of gender schemas or whatever? And it might be like Friends, simple things, but they had to watch the video in order to get that. And Dave, you do yours a little bit differently for your follow-up.
Yeah, what I'm actually going to be doing this fall is creating mini lectures using Articulate 360, which is a tool that we've begun using at Iowa State, where you can embed lectures and as well as assessment exercises as a way to provide the mini lecture to the students. And I'll be doing that before they do the application exercise, and then having them report back in terms of their application exercise assignment, which I think is the next thing that you have here.
Yeah, so then, ideally then they've had this baseline of knowledge. They've come together as a team. They know what they know or what they don't, what they need to revisit. They've connected with me as the instructor. So hopefully we're all set and ready to go, where they take this knowledge and they apply it to a complex real life example or situation. We really want them as much as possible to focus on coming to a consensus for a specific choice or a specific recommendation or a specific answer. And as you're doing, as you're creating your application exercises, try to really scaffold student problem solving. So, making sure that as they're answering these questions, it's really guiding them to come to a solution or that one answer. One of the mistakes that I made when I switched from face-to-face to online is that I had maybe like 10 questions in an application exercise that students sort of worked through to get to this one specific answer, but that was way too many to have online. And so I had to really narrow it down, and I was told by instructional designers, try not to provide more than 3 questions. And so you're really going to have to focus and narrow down on exactly what it is you want them to know. Because if you think about it, if there's 10 questions, a student could only participate in half of them, right? And totally miss the others. And then it dilutes the amount of discussion for each question. Like, that's a lot. But if there's only 3, then students are going to be constantly sort of coming back and talking within those 3. So these screenshots here are just from, I also use the discussion threads in Canvas for my application exercises. And I just wanted to point out that you can insert videos, you can insert images, and things like that. So you can make them really rich. Did you want to add anything to that, Dave?
No, I mean, I use Canvas's discussion board to help facilitate discussion on application exercises. I tend to provide closer to 5 questions for the students to consider when it comes to the application exercise. Not only do I use Harvard case studies, but I also have other types of exercises that my students work on, such as Excel-based exercises to work on an application exercise. I also invite corporate guest speakers to work on the application exercise and to help guide the discussion through videos. That way the students hear from the real world experts in terms of how a Walmart or a major grocery chain is facing some of these same supply chain issues. So in terms of lessons learned, I just want to keep this very brief. You want to focus on the student needs, ensure that they have the resources to be successful with completing each of the modules. Start simple. I mean, team-based learning is something that's been around for quite a while, but it hasn't been around as much in terms of the online environment. So you'll want to try to use, you don't have to use all the different principles of team-based learning to be successful with this. As Megan had mentioned in the opening comments, work with local resources such as your local teaching center. We have a group on campus that's been using the team-based learning methodology for many years, not necessarily online, but they're very well familiar with it. So they may have some ideas in terms of how to help you get started. Pilot your online learning to the extent that you have time to do that. I started with teaching online several years ago. Hired 3 undergraduate students to dry run or test drive my course before I went live, so to speak, with my online course in an actual semester, so I got feedback from the students. Consistency and standardization is so key. Seeing that you're online, it's important to be very clear in terms of what your expectations are, in terms of how to complete the assignments, how to get feedback from your students, from their team members, and to make adjustments as you run through the entire semester. So anyway, this is kind of our short version in terms of our presentation on this. We're certainly available to answer questions about this for our online community at any point to go in, and we're happy to go into more detail. But I think what we'd like to do now is to involve our panelists and get their thoughts in terms of their own experiences with teaching online. The goal here was not to make you experts on team-based learning, but just to help motivate a discussion about some of the issues that we've encountered, as well as learn from you in terms of your experiences. So I think that's where we wanted to go next. Is that right, Megan?
Yep, that's right.
Hey, Megan, Dave, thanks so much for sharing about your experience in this team-based learning environment. It's helpful for us to see some of the particular examples. I can also see some of the similar principles that we use in some of our coursework around, creating accountability for the students, being very clear in expectations, which requires quite a bit of planning, maybe more planning than many of us typically do in a face-to-face environment. And then also, creating that engaging atmosphere. I think for us, as we've rolled out online programming, I think much of it is a psychological or a mindset issue, both on the part of our faculty and our students. And so I think seeing examples like this, but also having design principles such as saying to successfully teach supply chain management, we have to work in groups. We have to be able to work on problems and solve problems. We have to be able to communicate. And so we're not going to lose those by going into an online environment. We're going to need to create tools and utilize tools in order to be able to do that successfully in this type of course, this type of modality, just like we would in our face-to-face. I know a tool that we use a lot at the graduate level is something we call communities. It's an LTI on Canvas that really creates a social media-like environment internal to the course. And and we have grading attached to that in many courses, and it requires students to come back at a regular pace and contribute to the learning, to bring in examples either from the text or from outside, and really create this rich, engaging environment. But it's also good to see some of the ways that you all have done it there at Iowa State.
Great, thank you. Yeah, no, we definitely feel like you have to have some structure, some scaffolding, so to speak, to facilitate student development in terms of being able to communicate with each other online. I mean, every semester I hear from one or two teams that they're struggling with reaching out, connecting, and working together in this online format. So providing them with some tools and some guidance and how to be successful is so key. I mean, I deliberately form my teams at the beginning of the semester so that I've got some team members who are located in Ames, Iowa, as well as those who are connecting remote, so that I can have a way of connecting either with the students in person as well as online in my online course. So to have some students who are local so that I can help them work through some of these communication challenges is something that I've also deliberately designed into my course.
Another challenge that I think we all have is how to do a lot of these things with synchronous and asynchronous at scale. And usually when we talk about at scale, it's the engagement and the interactive parts we can craft as faculty members. But the big hurdle is how to grade things that are for several hundred students. And one thing we've used that actually is also a part of Canvas, which is our LMS, but it also interfaces with Blackboard and D2L, but is called Flipgrid. And in this case, you could use it in teams with a team leader per week, or you could use it for individual students, depending on the size of the class. But what it basically does is you pose a question to the students for that week. And let's say it ties into either the content of supply chain management for that week, or it ties into supply chain management in the news, which, if nothing else, this is a great time for supply chain management in the news. But that way students know what the question then is, and our students across the world, a big part of their interaction with their world is just through their phones. And one nice thing about Flipgrid is they have the question, they go into, in this case, Canvas for us as the LMS, and they have whatever amount of time we give them at 60 seconds, 90 seconds, to systematically and hopefully coherently answer that question in video form. And then it automatically puts it into Canvas, where, depending on your settings, either just the faculty member can grade it. You can have it auto-graded in terms of yes, it's done, or no, it wasn't done, which again, at scale is handy. It's not as granular as we'd all like, but it's certainly efficient. Or you can open it up and have so all the students can see each other's post about that question. Because part of the interaction we're looking for is between the students and us. It's also between the students and the content, but it's also between the students themselves. And using Flipgrid gives them a really efficient and ultimately, for learning objectives, effective way to share their thoughts and also be able to absorb the thoughts and opinions of the other students.
Yeah, one of the things that I've been trying to develop a better understanding about is how do you assess class participation online. And I know with Canvas that they have some interesting analytic tools that allows you to evaluate their online presence and also evaluate to what extent are they posting comments online. So it sounds like the technology that you're proposing, Mark, is something that can help facilitate online participation.
And there's a second one along those same lines, David. That's a great point. That is not part of Canvas, and it does involve a charge to the students of about $25 per course per semester, but called Packback. And Packback is a discussion board that's curated by us, the faculty, but it uses AI to look at the student's post and to apply the rubric that we have to each post, auto-grade it, and then shoot it to the LMS, which again for us is Canvas. And along with that, when I say curate it, the students, rather than being graded just on their post, they only have to make one post per week in answer to another student's post, but they have to pose 2 questions on Packback. So as we've all been taught, sometimes it's more about the questions we ask than it is about the answers. And Packback really helps the students have critical thought when it comes to supply chain management issues. And again, it works well to try to implement and grade at scale.
So Mark, is that communicated to the students at the beginning of the semester that that's part of their, how they'll be evaluated for participation?
Yes, and the initial questions in Packback are usually about the course and the syllabus. And it's a great chance for them to learn how to use the software, which is very intuitive anyway. And also make sure they understand what's going on with the syllabus and the course management process for the semester.
We've got quite a few similarities to Packback in our graduate programs, where we're using this LTI called Yellow Dig, which is a little less robust than Packback around the using AI to grade the content, but it does a fabulous job at triggering engagement. And it I will say, from a faculty standpoint, it requires us to have a different perspective on how we think about discussion in the class. It's not this very structured conversation like Canvas discussion boards are. Yet it's something where students oftentimes in courses, they blow past the minimum requirements for engagement. And it's really this discovery and learning process. And oh yeah, by the way, I've got actually double the points that I need from an engagement process because I'm learning a lot. I'm asking questions and I'm getting responses from from the other students in the class. Colleagues at Iowa State, I've got a question for you. You know, supply chain really offers a fertile ground because of its diversity of different types of subjects. We need to teach technical subjects, you know, that are analytical or mathematically driven, and then also, you know, as Chad often says, it's supply chain management, which means we have the human factor of things that are involved. And so, as our faculty really have gotten more and more comfortable with supply chain, it takes a while for them to really see how their courses can look in an online modality. Can you all talk a little bit about that journey that you're having or have had as a faculty, and some things that you've done either to change your own mindset or to talk to colleagues about you know, how to be open at least to this idea?
Sure. And Shay, I'll jump in here. So, you know, I remember teaching my first online class, and it was an introduction to supply chain management, right? And I'm thinking to myself, well, this would be a good course to deliver online. You can just peg a lot of videos, get all the material out there. And by about halfway through, I was like, man, I think it'd actually be easier to teach a specific subject area. And then the next time I taught online, I taught a purchasing course. And I was like, man, I'd like to go back to teaching the introductory material. And that's actually when I had a realization that I had to learn a lot more about how to deliver material effectively. And those courses were so different that I couldn't take a one-size-fits-all approach. And so I'm actually thankful for that experience where, you know, unfortunately, I probably wasn't the most effective instructor, but kind of learning back or looking back on that, it taught me that, well, hey, I can have one method for maybe the introductory course that all majors in the College of Business have to take. And then I should have a very different delivery method for, you know, specific, in my case, upper level undergraduate courses. And I think that's been effective. And kind of how many of you have talked about the tools I think are so important is just that engagement. It's almost like being organized is that level of, that's the minimum. Students will become to be intrigued if you're organized, but if they see your engagement, that creates that next hurdle and they want to jump over it and really become, like you've talked about, they're going to provide more information or more level of engagement than you really, it's not that you wanted, that you expected, but you appreciate kind of their efforts to kind of keep going further.
For me, it was very much yeah, I mean, it takes more effort for me to teach and support student learning online than it does face-to-face. And I think people assume that they assume that teaching online is actually really easy. I had to also tell the students, like, this isn't just a one time a week thing. Like, you're going to have to get in and you're going to have to be working on this class multiple times, and there's deadlines, and I make deadlines throughout the week. And so you have to change your mindset. And then I also had to change my mindset, but I will say I much prefer being more engaged actually than just sort of letting the class run. So Amber, I think I interrupted you.
Oh, you're perfectly fine. You said some of the things, right? So I think, yeah, that engagement, and you guys also mentioned consistency. So not only being clear and organized, but having consistency. And if I send a weekly message, I send it at the exact same time. And, you know, especially with the spring semester when all students were just thrown into this online environment, they didn't necessarily want it. It was even more difficult to build that engagement. So I tried to remember they were thrown into this, right? I was thrown into this. How can we make the best of this? So, you know, even trying to make a lot of, like, my videos, you guys mentioned, you know, how do we move this stuff online? I try to make all my videos short. I'm not repeating the same type of lecture I might give to an audience of 60 or 70 in a classroom. I'm making short videos on specific topics. And to kind of keep that attention. And I even brought my kids into a few of the videos to make it a little more interactive. I did have to pay them, but But yeah, so, and just to kind of keep that engagement with the students and keep them hopefully interested. Kind of one thing with that, like I said, I'd send a weekly reminder. These are all the things that are due, but I always kept a video in there, and I'd have one of my kids come in and tell like a weekly joke. And I'd have people come back and say, it kind of forced me to see, okay, these are things I need to do. And they maybe before would have skipped over some of those things. So just, keeping that consistency, keeping, and just, kind of keeping it more real.
I was wondering if the group had any thoughts about online assessments, exams, quizzes. What were some of the challenges that you faced when it came to exams, and how do you put in some controls, if you will, to ensure that we don't have a lot of cheating that's going on?
Yeah, so I kind of say what I did. So I didn't use any type of proctoring or anything. And I'm used to I'm teaching intro 300 level class with, I have 250 students this next semester. And typically it would be a multiple choice, true false exam in the testing center. Online, in the past, I've used proctors, but I didn't do that this summer or in the spring. I shifted it, put some more work on me where I had more short answers. I might have had other assignments that took place with some of that, so more discussion boards, article discussions in that regard. And then I just built bigger test banks, right? So where before, I might have 10 questions on how to calculate a weighted moving average, none of those students are going to get the exact same exam as their counterparts, just to kind of help with some of that. But I didn't use any type of proctoring service or anything like that. It's kind of what I did. But yeah.
And just to follow up on Amber, I think sometimes those online assessments, sometimes when I really think about it, I think the person who has the biggest problem with those might be me. I'm like, oh, everyone's going to have rampant cheating and this is going to be the worst thing ever. And, I think that's where, and being prepared will be a little bit more helpful than if we had to make the switch like we did, or Iowa State did in the spring semester. But that's where I think we can bring in some of the things like Megan and Dave, you guys were talking about with the team-based learning, and you can provide some assessments or some points to that type of learning. And then also, some of those online assessments, at least through Canvas, our learning management system, I have to put in more questions
to avoid learning material.
If I can jump in there just quickly, maybe wrap that up. That was, to me, it was very much a mindset shift. And what I tried to do is think through, what do I really want to drive home from this particular module that they will remember 6 months from now, perhaps, about this content, and then put that into the type of question where they really had to think about it. And similar to Amber, I used a lot of short answers. So they really had to type out an answer, and I could see their thinking process and whether they were able to clearly summarize the material. And I felt like, well, now I know, yeah, we're probably using resources. In fact, I told them it was open book, open notes, but they were able to summarize this in a meaningful way. And with last spring, having in class and then shift to online, I was able to do a quick comparison. And what I found is that performance was actually very similar across my students for what they did in class and what they did online. So it was really just thinking more around, what will the student take away from this? Not, do I feel good about whether or not they were able to cheat, or whether it was a fair assessment across all the students in the class and so forth.
Hey, and just since we've got a group of supply chain management faculty here, just really interested if we could switch gears just for a second. One of the things I struggle with is bringing in simulations and bringing in kind of outside resources to an online class. It's almost like you're one further step removed. And so I'm just wondering if anyone has any best practices that they could share about something maybe that they found success with.
So Peter, I've done a little bit of that, and I'd be happy to speak to it for a moment. So we in the online master's program have been using simulations now, I guess, for about 2.5 years. And we've tried them in other venues as well, and for example, non-degree education, et cetera. And it's actually, it actually works pretty well to do simulation online, especially if you're talking about the dynamic game style simulations like Fresh Connection or Links or something like that, where teams of students are participating in repetitive decision making over periods of time. And I have found that the best tool for me in that scenario is to try to use the breakout room style features on the learning management systems, whether that's on Zoom or Canvas or whatever it might be, and then sort of simultaneously be operating a Zoom main room, I guess is what you could call it, where people could come in and listen to anything I had to say. Now, that's in the electronic simulation space. In tactile simulations, doing things like, making Lego-based manufacturing systems and things of that nature, where we've all kind of put together demonstrations in courses. You have to kind of think about it in a different sense, because there you're going to ask students to probably build something or create something in their own environment, and you're going to be guiding that. And so there I've had more success using a more asynchronous approach, where you're talking about a video setup, and then where they get the apparatus built, whatever that might be, whether it's a manufacturing line or a plant of some kind, whatever, and they get that built ahead of time. We flip the class a little bit, and they come back and they join me in a live session where now I kind of put them through the paces of making changes, et cetera, to the system, and then conducting experiments, and then they have to kind of report back on the experiments. So that one kind of goes from sync to async a number of times as the simulation carries on. And so regardless of which, I guess, mode you go into, it's been my experience that the most value is created in that final session that you've got, which is a synchronous session where each team is going to report out and be held accountable by their peers. And so there we're going into a large scale classroom like we've got here with ourselves today, and the team leaders step out and kind of bare their souls about how things went, and then are given an opportunity to be held accountable by the others in the room. So just my experience, but it does seem to be something that's workable. It does take some planning, and you have to be very judicious about how you make choices between asynchronous and synchronous modes sort of during and throughout. Because there are times when I think moving into an asynchronous mode makes a lot more sense than maybe we give it credit for. Love to hear anybody else's comments too.
As we get close to the end of the discussion, I would just add, Chad, that one of the benefits we've seen with the electronic simulations in an online environment is we can spread them out further across the class and have those teams work asynchronously and then report back. And then also, as was mentioned a couple of times already, I think Megan was talking about video feedback from an instructor, and it really gives us more of an opportunity to interact with student teams than we would have if we were asking the students to do those simulations in the classroom in more of a traditional setting. And so there are certainly some added benefits that come along with all of that work and preparation.
Well, I think we have covered a lot, and I would love to sit and chat with all of you for a lot longer. But I think we'll wrap it up. So I wanted to just close with a few thoughts. I think I would prefer if we weren't in a pandemic. But if we are in a pandemic and we are being, pushed to teach online, then I think we can sort of look for windows of opportunity here to really sort of reimagine in many ways how to do support student learning online. And we often see that the presumption is that face-to-face is better than online, but I think it's very clear here that there are really good opportunities to support student learning even better in some cases, and in many cases for online. And so, I think also, we know there are a lot of barriers, but actually, there's beginning to be a discussion about how online classes may actually be more inclusive and more accessible for a lot more people. And so, you know, instead of thinking like, I have to teach online, like, this is an opportunity to teach online and to really provide education to people who, you know, maybe didn't have access to it before, or who may feel like they can participate more in an online setting than they might in a face-to-face setting, right? So it could be much more inclusive in that sense. I also wanted to say, this may not be the time to create your most perfect class because you might not have the bandwidth. So if you need permission to just start at the very basics, this is your permission. Just start at the very basics for this fall, and then, you know, work your way up, right? Dave and I have been doing this for a long time. The Tennessee folks have been doing this for years. So, you know, if you need to just start with the very basics, then just do that. And my favorite quote that I have left faculty with is, "Love quiets fear and kindness eases change." So if we can be kind to ourselves and kind to our students during this time of change, I think it will be really helpful. So thank you, everyone.
Yeah, and I just want to say supply chain management's always been important, but as Mark points out, the whole world now knows it. And we're so grateful to our colleagues at Iowa State University, the University of Tennessee at Knoxville for today's webinar. It's been brilliant. I've learned a lot. We all learned a lot. We thank you very much. Thank you so much.